So one of the things I keep finding myself coming back to when I keep, talking about all this is this concept of games being made for non-gamers, right? And I think some of it's speculative, some of it's subjective. I think Blizzard Activision turned WoW into a slightly more complicated idle RPG clicker game to bring in non-gamers, and you could argue that and say I'm wrong, and that's fair enough. You're free to do that. But I think one really good example of a very modern, just recently released game that just to me is just blatantly designed for non-gamers, and design is more of a showpiece, kind of almost like a it feels like when you see those concept cars that brands will release every once in a while, they just look kind of fucking weird, but kind of cool and impressive, but not practical. And it's Red Dead Redemption 2. That game got so much fucking hype. It was like this was the second coming of Jesus in the gaming industry. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is not a game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a collection of mini games in a cowboy life simulator. And that doesn't necessarily make it bad, but at no point did it ever feel like I was playing a game. And to be fair, I've not finished it because after about 6 or 7 hours, I was just bored stiff. The pacing of the game is very slow. There's no continuity because it's each individual, you go on a quest, which is like a lot of games nowadays. It's just, go to the mini-map marker. Okay, and they tried to do a little bit better where it was kind of a general area, maybe not a specific X that you just walk to, but it not really still wasn't, it wasn't, a vague series of directions like find them north in the mountains and you had to kind of figure it out yourself. It was just go to the spot on the map. And then you go to the spot on the map and you do, maybe you'd shoot some people, but, the mechanics aren't that difficult. Or maybe you just press X a few times while a scripted cutscene that, makes you feel like you're a part of it goes through. Or, or you just have a little talk. But there's not a lot of consistency within the game. A lot of weird mechanics. And I think one of the biggest things that people pointed out was there's no progression in the game. Because, again, it's not a game. Progression would imply there is a game there. But a cowboy life simulator doesn't have progression. Like, one of the biggest criticisms I saw was that, and then I noticed, was that, purchasing the weapons, which you would think would be kind of that's the progression system, right? Like, you don't really level up per se. Like, you kind of unlock, your health and your, the Deadeye thing, and stamina kind of they get a little bit better as you go. Not a lot better, but, enough to make the game a little bit easier. But A, it doesn't really feel like you need those. And so B, the weapon upgrades, which you would say as the game gets more difficult, I'm going to need, better weapons, is not true. Most people were saying they beat the game with the, what you got in the beginning, the shotgun and the repeater. That's all you needed, and, the pistol on occasion. Or maybe you preferred the pistol, but the starting weapons were all you never needed. So the progression was, it existed in kind of theory, but it wasn't really there. It wasn't necessary. It was an afterthought almost. And I really get the impression that Red Dead Redemption 2 was made for my grandpa. Because my grandpa is an old man who grew up in the Midwest. And that means he loves cowboy movies and country music. And I think he would get a blast out of Red Dead Redemption 2 because it's a gorgeous game. It's, the file sizes, I forget exactly how big it is. It was it was many, many gigabytes. I remember it was ridiculous. Was it over 100, I think, maybe? I don't know, but I remember it was 2 discs because I bought the physical copy of the game. Because last time I bought a Rockstar game through the PlayStation Store and tried to download it. I had to wait 2 days because the file size was so fucking big. So I bought a physical disc copy, and it was 2 discs. One is just literally just a data disc that's there to download onto the hard drive to, make up for all these just spectacular graphics. But I feel like the graphics almost lend themselves even more to the fact that it's a game for non-gamers. It's a concept car that's meant to be all flashy and look nice and get people to show up and go, ooh, what is that? But then people who actually, want, you look at like guys that race cars and actually get into racing. Those cars aren't made to look nice. They're made to be functional, right? And so Red Dead Redemption 2 wasn't made to be a functional game. It was made to be, it's the centerpiece almost. Like, hey, look how pretty this is. And it is. It's a wonderful game. But it really does remind me of those kind of walking simulator games that came out in it was probably the early 2000s. They were kind of like those art piece projects. And I forget, there was one that was, it was real popular amongst kind of the streaming crowd for a little bit. And it was just a straight just walk through simulator. Like, there was no gameplay at all. It was basically a self-guided roller coaster. And while Red Dead Redemption 2 is not that bad, again, it really does feel like it was designed for people who don't want an actual game. And I guess that is fair enough because it's very casual. It's very laid back. But again, I wouldn't say that makes it a game. That's to the point where it's boring. And that was kind of my biggest thing. And so a lot of people say, well, it's the online play. And I'm like, that's a shitty answer, if that's the truth. Because, you're selling this full package offline game. And really, especially because that's what people came to expect of Rockstar. Rockstar Games is meant for, everybody. I'm sorry, what am I saying? Rockstar Games is known for making these good single-player games that also have good online content. GTA, what do we got, 5 now? Was, really touted as having, this good single-player story. But then the online play was fun until I guess it got not, because, again, we're back to corporate greed and they realized they could sell those shark card things and make just a fuck ton of cash. But I think, and so you look at GTA games, and the GTA games also look very good. I remember I played GTA 5, and it looks really good, especially given the scope of the game. But GTA 5 is not really meant for everybody. It's a little too gritty, as all the GTA games always have been. They swear, and it's violent, and it is what it is. But what I noticed about Red Dead Redemption 2 is it's not inherently like that. There's pretty clear non-violent options in the game. So, if my grandpa wanted to play it, and I'm not going to kill anybody. That's a sin, and you don't do that because my grandpa is a very religious man. He has the option to lasso people up and knock them out instead of shoot them. You can do this. You can make people surrender. You really get the intention that it wasn't designed to be cowboy shoot 'em up. It was intended to be this kind of it's digital cowboy LARPing simulator 2018. And it was, and I guess that's okay. That really is okay. It's, again, the games industry is changing. They're including more people. And it really would be okay if a lot of this new revenue that they're bringing in from these, new types of titles made for non-gamers were, also being used to fund really good titles for the gamers, but that's also not the case. And it's really weird to me how much effort was put into Red Dead Redemption 2. But again, I guess it's all about selling units. Because I know Rockstar's production budgets are fucking they're outrageous, they're huge, because they make these giant, massive, beautiful games. And again, it might be to the point where if they sold 1 unit of Red Dead Redemption 2 to every gamer in the world, it wouldn't be enough to cover the cost. So they need to sell it to non-gamers. They need to sell it to my grandpa. And I'm sure there's also probably an incentive from the console companies. Because then, somebody who maybe doesn't own a PS4 will go buy a PS4 so they can play Red Dead Redemption 2. And it's a weird time in gaming, I feel like more and more, the issue that we always run into is that the actual gamers themselves are being left behind in favor of these other people. And that's where a lot of people get frustrated. And, it just sounds like lots of bitching, right? And I guess it is. But again, I feel like I think a lot of people feel, which is, Red Dead Redemption 2 had so much hype. It was supposed to be the game that saved gaming. It was the good AAA title, right? because Red Dead Redemption, the first one, was so well received. It was, lauded for being really good. And I never played the first Red Dead Redemption. But I know it was very well received, very well respected. And I don't know if Red Dead Redemption 2 plays like that did. Was that one also just a cowboy life simulator? This really slow pace, like get on a horse and mosey? Because that is, there's a large, Red Dead 2, the map is gigantic, and I know you can unlock fast travel, and that in and of itself is a problem, because I find fast travel is one of those things that, again, because gaming, if it's done right, fast travel is something you should not want. Bethesda's good at this. Bethesda makes you not want to fast travel. Or used to anyways. Like Morrowind, and Morrowind did it the best, where you had bus stops in Morrowind, the Silt Striders, and you would use them to get from city to city. But I remember specifically in Morrowind constantly refusing to use the Silt Striders. I didn't want to take them because there was so much shit to find in that game. I would be walking around, and then there'd be some random guy running around the street. And you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And you'd stop and talk to him, and then you'd have this 10-minute little interaction of this individual's story, and it was, it really made the game feel alive. And Skyrim had that a bit, where you'd be wandering around, but then it was very copy and paste, where it's like, oh look, more elves, and they have the same shit to say. Oh look, some more, soldiers, they have the same shit to say. So it was, again, a little more phoned in, but it was there. And I don't know, maybe Red Dead did have that, and I just missed it in the time that I played the game. But for the most part, traveling from point A to point B, I didn't really find myself being distracted by gameplay elements. And again, it was distracted by, the view. You'd come across a ridge, and all of a sudden you would see this massive expanse of completely, pathable terrain that you could go explore. And from a distance, it looked amazing. Like, it looks like a postcard, right? But it being real pretty doesn't make for a good game. It just makes it real pretty. And again, I feel like, that graphics aspect, I feel like they dumped a lot of money into the appearance of the game, because my grandpa would be real impressed to say, this is a game? I can go there and walk, I can walk and see that? He'd be real impressed. I'm going to go, yeah, it looks nice, but what's there to do? And then you start to think about, the really iconic games, right? Most of them look like hell. Look at Final Fantasy VII. Maybe it's just, you ask, get a big group of gamers together and say best RPG ever. A lot of them are going to say Final Fantasy VII, right? Final Fantasy VII looks like they weren't even trying. Cutscenes in Final Fantasy VII look like dog shit. They look like a kindergartner wasn't trying. And you know why? Because the game itself was great. The cutscenes were only there as a method to move the story along. They were there to get you from gameplay to gameplay. Diablo, the entire Diablo franchise, well, I guess the entire Diablo 1 and 2, and then the expansion, the Lord of Destruction expansion. Diablo games didn't look that great before Diablo 3. That weird kind of 3/4 isometric top-down view is just, it's a little jarring. Path of Exile does it, and it's still, I find myself, constantly scrolling back, I want to see some more shit, what's in front of me, damn it? But that's part of the gameplay, too, is they limit your field of view. But, it's, kind of the more pixelated, I hate using the word retro, but I guess, because it wasn't retro when Diablo did it, it was just what they were, graphics were pixelated, you knew what everything was, but it certainly didn't look good. There was detail there, but a lot of it, you filled in a lot of the blanks with your own imagination, this is a skeleton. I'm like, no, that's some white lines, but yeah, it's a skeleton, I agree. And the Diablo games, 1 and 2 were great. Because again, I think the gameplay was more important than the appearance. And I think a lot of modern games, that's what you find, is that these games that are made for non-gamers, one of the keystones of it is how good it looks. And that almost to the point where it's becoming kind of the canary in the coal mine, where if you start to see a game that is presented as having really good graphics, in both cutscenes and gameplay, it's almost a concern, because that's where that's where all the budget went. Dark Souls, the whole Soulsborne series is another good example of that, where they didn't really go for, not to say that the graphics were bad, and I mean the art design is wonderful. I mean they got some fucked up people working for them, because some of that shit is weird, but in the greatest way possible, because it really feeds into the entire kind of feeling of the game. The immersion is made so much better because it's not just, the monsters are so, just hideous in some cases and horrendous and awful, and it really it helps kind of submerge you in this just world of nightmares. But at the same time, the graphics weren't amazing. They were good, definitely, but you could tell that the majority of the game engine wasn't there to make the game look good. The graphics were good within the game engine that was made to be fun. And I think that's kind of the main kind of differentiation, is doing the best with the game engine you have rather than making the game engine fit the graphics you have.